Hi everyone, it's Victoria Carter, and today I'm going to start a new mini-series. This is the first mini-series I've ever done, so if you guys like this, please let me know and I will do more focused mini-series in the future. So today is episode 1 of Character Crash Course, and we're starting completely from scratch, brand new character, so here we go. So every episode I'm planning to do for my character crash course is going to have something that you can go to for a reference. Normally I would do a Disney movie because everybody's seen those. That's really why. I know this is a writing channel, but that's why I always bring up Disney movies, because most of you have seen Disney movies, and I don't know what books you guys have read, so. But this one is through Dungeons & Dragons or D&D 5th edition. And when you create a character on Dungeons & Dragons, it's really, really simple because there's two kinds of players in Dungeons & Dragons. There's the DM, the Dungeon Master, or there's just the players. And trust me, being a Dungeon Master is a lot harder than just playing Dungeons & Dragons. Which means that being a player and creating your own character is like the easiest part of the whole game. And they basically hand you everything you need to know. I mean, of course there's stats and there's weapons and things like that, but that doesn't make the game fun. What makes the game fun is the character portion of the story and basically becoming someone new. So, let's get into it. So the first thing, I have some notes here. So for the first thing it asks you is, so it asks you for your character's name, and you can come up with any name. And I've actually been in sessions of Dungeons & Dragons where people have changed their name midway through. They're like, that was the name my clan called me, but my adventure name is something different. And then they would say it because they didn't like the name. So just remember, just like in writing your zero draft, none of this is permanent and you can always go back and change it. It's a little harder with some of the other stuff we're going to get into, but names are pretty easy. Okay, the second thing you pick is your race. So this is pretty simple. This is like, are you going to be a half-elf, a dwarf, a tiefling, a human, whatever. And this might not apply in your story, but if you're writing science fiction or fantasy, this is something you might need to think about and might need to discover more. Usually you're going to pick human, though, if you're going to be writing a story. But in Dungeons & Dragons, it's really fun to pick a different race. And then you pick a class. So a class would be like, are you a long range, like archer or sorcerer? Or are you short range, like a barbarian? Or like something like that. Now, I know that that's more specific to Dungeons & Dragons or adventure type novels. But how you could word this is, what is your character proficient at the time? So currently, what is something your character is really, really good at that's going to help them in the future? So, for example, if they're really good at like finding herbs or plants that you can eat in the wild, maybe on your adventure that you go on with your characters, they come to a point where they're in between towns and they're super hungry, and the character discovers like this plant and they know that this root tastes like steak. You know, it's your story. You can make it up. And that could be something that could be very entertaining and definitely a point in your story that could bring some very interesting plot points and character development. So basically, what is your character good at the time? The next thing is background. So what do they have a background in? All of us come from somewhere. All of us have a background in something. For example, if I were to say something from my background, I would say, I was a sandwich maker at Wendy's. You know, and so perhaps whenever I go to Wendy's, I always know what's supposed to come on pretty much all of my sandwiches because I did that for like 2 years in high school. So what's their background? In Dungeons & Dragons, you you can purchase the player handbook, and I have, for 2 reasons. One, because I actually play Dungeons and Dragons. Not as much as I'd like to, but I do play. And then the second thing is, I use it when I am stuck on a character, because there's a lot of good stuff in there for backstory, and it kind of helps get the juices flowing, the creative juices flowing. So it's awesome. Some of the options they have for background, and this is going to be more fantasy related, because that's what Dungeons and Dragons is. So, entertainer, criminal, knight, nobleman, pirate, those are some of the things I wrote down. They have a lot more, and if you go to, Wizards of the Coast, they have a lot more, through that as well. So next is the next thing. So personality traits. So the personality traits are going to be, like, what are some things that are kind of like quirky, I guess, for your character? Like every time they see fire, they want to touch it, or they want to like use it, or whenever there's an opportunity for fire, they want to use it. You see this actually in Madagascar. One of the penguins in Madagascar always wants to blow things up. So that could be a personality trait. Obviously your characters are going to be more fleshed out, but, you could have something like, whenever they get into a large crowd, they always want to be the person that stands out the most, and then so like they always wear clothing that doesn't match because they want to stand out. And you could create a backstory for that, but you don't need to, and that's the whole point. You can just start. Sorry, my notes fell on the ground. All right. The next thing is ideals. And now ideals is interesting. Ideals is something that the character stands by no matter what. So, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, some of the examples are faith, tradition, freedom, fairness, and then you can pick, in Dungeons and Dragons, you can pick like chaotic evil, chaotic lawful, etc. So if you want, if faith is your like ideal and you're chaotic good, then that means, you believe everyone can be saved and there's good in all. But if faith is your ideal and you're chaotic evil, then maybe you would use the religion in that world to hurt other people because that's the way that the deity would like it. So you can see how ideals don't necessarily mean if you're good or bad. It's just something that you're going to stand by and something that's going to shoot you through your adventure so that you stay pretty much the same character and you can get back into that character's headspace. The next thing that they ask you to do is bonds. And bonds are who you're loyal to. So, if you're a pirate, you might be loyal to your ship or your captain. If you're a knight, you will be loyal to the kingdom. So you're going to do everything you can for the good of the kingdom. If you're an entertainer, then perhaps you are doing everything you can for a family member. Like maybe you've been charged with taking care of your younger sister, and you're on this adventure because she's being watched by someone that you trust, and you need to make more money to help out the other entertainers that you're from. And you can see how these tie together, and it can make it really easy. Again, if you look at the player's handbook, it has a lot of good stuff in there. Now, the last thing is the flaws, and the flaws are what make all of the silly hijinks that you hear about in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, it just depends on what your dungeon master and your group are comfortable with doing, but it can get very, very fun. So, flaws might be that you're selfish. And if you see, if everyone gets a treasure, you might like fight or gamble with someone for the treasure. Or you might have a temper. And if someone insults you, even in the slightest, even if it doesn't even sound like an insult, but it could be taken as an insult, maybe you have a bad temper and you have to defend your honor. You can look up flaws, character flaws, or things like that. And flaws are, I think, easier to find than some of the other ones. But there's a lot of really great resources. And if you're building a character, I would recommend starting with Dungeons and Dragons because it'll give you like 1 or 2 sentences very quickly that you can just roll with, literally. I didn't mean to do that. And then you can kind of move forward with whatever story you're doing. So that's what I got for you today for our first character creation video, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.